I don't know if you hear that or not, but he's putting publications out that inform parents of options they should be able to consider with regard to their kids, school choice and things like that, tutoring services. A couple of observations, you're exactly right. One of the challenges we have, not just, well, in education generally, is a lack of ownership. A lot of parents really don't feel like they have a sense of ownership in the school their child attends. It's a government school, it's not the local public school. And secondly, we found this under No Child Left Behind, a lot of folks who find out that they have the free tutoring option or the school choice option don't know how to take advantage of it because the local district has made it very difficult for them to find that out. And I'm not overstating that. They have gone out of their way to make life difficult for that. And on school choice, a lot of parents decided, even though they had the option, not to do it because of that sense of, I have a relationship with my child's school, even though it's a failing school, I'd rather keep my child there. I find that it's disappointing. I can't second guess a parent's choice for his or her child, but it seems to me that a well-informed, comprehensive understanding of the options available is going to make a difference. And it needs to get into the hands of parents. If it gets into the hands of administrators, it stays at the office most of the time, in my humble opinion. Yes?
Reed Howard, Frank Hurricane. What would you say are the 2 or 3 top objections that people have to supplemental education services the government has?
You mean the Obama administration?
Yeah, the Obama administration.
Yeah. Well, I think the first objection is the funding. As you know, under No Child Left Behind, districts have to set aside or be able to set aside upwards of 20% of some of their federal Title I funds to underwrite the purchase of tutoring services. And I really encourage you to use the term free tutoring or something like that. Supplemental educational services sounds like espionage. I don't know. That's yes. Look good. Free tutoring. How can you not love free tutoring? It's free. You're paying for it, but it's free. So anyway, the money. Districts, especially in this economic climate, even with the stimulus, districts say they need all the federal money they can get, and they don't want to have to give up some of it to go to these services. Secondly, it is the idea that the for-profits, whether they should be a part of it or not, why don't we just let the school districts do it? The existing system. My problem with that, and it was not allowed in the first 4 years of No Child Left Behind, is that if the district wasn't successful the first time, why should they be allowed to continue to make money trying to do it? I mean, it's very exciting. But if you are beholden to the education establishment, it's difficult. And the third thing is quality control. Their argument is quality control. And that is there's no record of accomplishment. You've got all these mom and pop shops. We don't know who's teaching us math, who's teaching us English. We don't know if they know anything. And so how can we trust them to do it? Well, there is quality control. There's a quality control problem in American public education. It's called American public education. So that to me is a specious argument as well. That doesn't mean that poor performing businesses should be allowed to do this. But the states under No Child Left Behind were supposed to certify the providers and oversee the quality. Now, they may not be doing it, but I don't think you wanted Washington to be doing it, not in 2001. So those, to me, are the most major concerns I hear. I think you can counter each of them. And I think when you can counter them, you need to do it. You need to do it with your records of success. You need to do it with your efficiency indicators, anything you can to demonstrate that those arguments are false. The money argument, I don't know. I've said this so many times. I've never met a superintendent, a state chief, who said, please, I have enough money. I got it made. I mean, if you fully funded No Child Left Behind, fully funded Title I, whatever that means, do you think the states would say, good, we got enough, don't need anymore? So they're always going to argue you're taking money away from public schools. I just don't think you have to buy that argument.
Hi, Dana Stewart with Specialized Education Services, Inc. Do you see any warning signs about the recent waivers given for special ed, which seems to me to be very unusual?
Special ed is always stood apart from ESEA, both in terms of policy, politics, three things, and money. It's always kind of bothered me. It bothered me at the local level as a state chief because it was always supposed to be understood as a supplement to ESEA for our most needy students. But it's seen as something off by itself. So the waiver issue there is different from the waiver issue on ESEA. I think that's wrong. I think that's misguided. But so I don't think the waivers, any waivers provided in IDEA will carry over. But to say that it's a bothersome development, I agree, it's a bothersome development. I think the Bush administration deserves some credit for really trying to step up and change some of the ways special education is understood in this country. And I think now there's some concern that this administration's backing away from that for all kinds of reasons. Yes, sir.
Tim Larkin from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Gene, moving forward, whether SES gets reauthorized or not, I'm wondering if that's even the right question. You know, that's the concern in this room, but I'm wondering if it's the right question, because at the end of the day, we're still stuck with the problem. Whether you authorize it or not, we still have this major gap in student achievement. So it ought to tell us very loud and clear that there's great opportunity on the horizon if we're looking and participating in what will be. Whether it's SES or not, who cares?
Yeah, well, first of all, as a practical matter, reauthorization has to take place sooner or later unless Congress decides to do away with Elementary and Secondary Education Act, which has been in place since 1965, I guess. So it has to take place. So it's a relevant question, but I think your point is really the more important point, and that is, no matter what they do with reauthorization, the mess on our hands is bigger than reauthorization. And that's why I argue you need to have a revolution in the way we understand American education. Very simple things. Simple to say, very difficult to accomplish, the way we talk about it. What we're really talking about is schooling. Education is not schooling. Education takes place, learning takes place long before schooling starts. It goes on forever. But most of what we talk about is schooling. School day, school year, school buildings, school regulations. You go to school, you come home from school. We live in an age where that could be a relatively modest part of what education's all about. There's tremendous opportunity to rethink this. I was telling someone over a cup of coffee earlier today, the idea that we close schools because of flu or snow, that should be a relic of a gone time. There's no need to close schools. Most of the kids in school are multitasking anyway, for Pete's sakes. So, I mean, we should be really rethinking this whole idea. But, frankly, that takes two things that are typically lacking. One is real imagination. It's hard to do. We all went to school. We all know people in school. We all understand the system. Most of us are working with the system. So it's hard for us to think differently about how it might happen. And secondly, it will take an amazing amount of political will to be able to go to a city like Richmond, where I live. Good-sized town, manageable-sized town, school districts in trouble like it is in many places. How neat it would be for the mayor and the state legislature there in Richmond and the governor to sit there and say, okay, you know what we're going to do in Richmond? We're going to rethink urban education. And we're going to say the following. And all of a sudden we have a whole new approach that embraces technology and charters and entrepreneurs and all kinds of things, many of the stuff you do. Now, it may not work, but the status quo isn't working. But to be able to find people willing to do that is going to be very difficult. And I don't mean Republicans and Democrats, I mean anybody. It takes tremendous political will and a sense of vision. And the closer you get to elections, the more difficult it is to find those two things.
In the past, the core of educators came from women. And they were bright, excellent, educated women that went into education because so many other areas were closed to them. And now these areas have opened.